Okay, this is the second video I've made on this topic, and it's a response to ItstheSuperfly, your video called 2 Mel's Basket Case, Pay Attention. And this is on the topic of, ultimately, of Jesus Freak 777 and his appeal to the Abraham-Isaac moral dilemma. Okay, let me just pick up on some of the things you're saying here. ItstheSuperfly. You say that YouTube, and this is your critique of Mel's video that she made to you and the distress that she's having because she's getting some very, very nasty comments on her channel. Not by you, of course, no, because you're terribly polite, aren't you? You say this, you say YouTube is not a place for the faint of heart or the weak in spine. Well, what do you think about that? What's your take on that? I mean, do you think it should be like that? Do you think it should be a place for the faint of heart, the weak in spine? Do you think there is a place for the faint of heart and the weak in spine on YouTube? Or do you think it's okay for the weakest to go to the wall? I'm guessing you think it's okay for the weakest to go to the wall, because I don't see you coming out in favour of the weak. I don't see you coming out here in favour of the faint of heart. I see you championing might as right, actually, here. Okay, then you go on to talk about Mel and comparing her, what she says about you to what she said about Thunderfoot. You seem to think that she's making some kind of a diagnosis of mental illness when she critiques your video. But I don't think she is. I mean, she says, or you accuse her of saying that your outrage is faux, or forced, or misplaced, your outrage at what Jesus Freak 777 had said. That's not a diagnosis of mental illness, in my opinion. I mean, you may disagree. It doesn't come across as a diagnosis of mental illness or accusation of attempted psychoanalysis, an accusation of any kind. To me, it comes across more like theatre criticism. That's what it comes across. It seems to me like she's critiquing your performance. And I have to say that I would tend to agree with her critique. My day job is in theatre, actually. I work with actors professionally. And your performance does look like that. Your outrage looks forced. It may not be, but I have to tell you, on camera, you look like you're playing it up for theatrical effect. So I don't think it is psychoanalysis she's attempting there. I think it's fair criticism of your performance. Okay, then you go on to say about how kind you are being and how measured and restrained your criticism is. And of course it's always very easy to be measured and restrained when your commenters do the dirty work for you, isn't it? And you say that there's going to be people who are far less kind than I'm being to you. And you talk about TJ a little bit there. And yeah, TJ is very good at not being kind sometimes. And again, I'd be interested to know what you think about that. Whose side are you on? I know which side you appear to be on, and I'd like you to tell me. But of course, you're not like TJ, are you? No, you make a point of distancing yourself from the rabid dogs. You say, I happen to have a little more compassion to my fellow human being than that. Really? Well, that's very Christian of you, isn't it? And then you go on about saying, do you understand what it means to have compassion and to have empathy? You know, the implication being that you think Mel doesn't have compassion and doesn't have empathy, because of course you do, and your empathy is based in, what's the words you use, rationale, reason and logic. And rationale, reason and logic tell you that the empathy that you have for your fellow man is the same empathy which you think that Jesus Freak should have for his daughter. You're kind of linking empathy and, I think you call it fatherliness here. And anybody with an ounce of compassion, an ounce of empathy, of course would not be able to sacrifice their child, would not be able to make the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate, the most difficult sacrifice. Of course, it would be impossible or very, very difficult, wouldn't it? Regardless of whatever was at stake. Regardless of whatever was at stake. But you know what? Rationale, logic and reason aren't always happy bedfellows with empathy. Quite often, rationale, reason and logic demand that you forego empathy, that you ignore the fact that the person who the knife is heading towards is a close relative. Sometimes you have to sacrifice if you are truly empathic, if you are truly concerned with your fellow man, particularly if you are particularly concerned with the faint of heart and the weak in spine, if you have some compassion, sometimes you have to make massive sacrifices for the overall good, for the general good. And that's really this Abraham and Isaac story, you know. It's not really about somebody doing what the boss tells him. It's about people making ultimate sacrifices. Do you understand that? And then, of course, you celebrate your own fatherliness and how children are terribly important to you and how important that is. There is a name for that. It's called nepotism. That's the name for that, nepotism. It's that kind of fatherliness and concern for your own children above all others, which leads to dynasties and which leads to pharaonic successions and which leads to nepotism in the boardroom and which leads to George Bush Sr. giving way to George Bush Jr. That's the logic of compassion and care for one's own. Those things are usually the opposite of rationale, reason and logic, and they're certainly not the high moral standards which you seem to think they are. They're very nice and we've all got them, and I love my own kids and they're very important things to have, but don't confuse them with rationale and reason and logic. Otherwise you're just putting another god on the pole there, aren't you, really? That's all you're doing. You're just saying, I'm worshipping my children. Anyway, that was a real bollocky, twatty little video you made there, mate. And I've never watched your videos before, and I'll try to avoid watching them again, because I have to say, you do come off really, really patronising. And all this macho talk about how, you know, you're going to stand up to Christians, and you're going to stand up to this person, and you're going to stand up to that person. You're coming across like a bit of a twat. Sorry about that. Anyway,